Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. In today's packed show, Canadian Sikhs warn the nation's politicians if they didn't act over India's transnational repression, they would ban them from entering gurdwaras and enjoying photo opportunities with the Sikh community. Well, we have the responses from the politicians and they make very telling reading, unsurprisingly. One of the most senior RSS officers is seen in Washington, D.C. Well, what was he doing there? But I am happy to say that he was given quite a welcome by none other than one of our favourite anti-RSS warriors. And we have a video from that actual scene that unfolded. A Sikh police officer is tortured to death by his colleagues in Amritsar. We'll give details including the horrific injuries that the 30-year-old Jammu Sikh suffered. And we'll take a look at an insidiously dangerous article in the Indian mainstream press about Khalistan and the Khalistan movement. Not just propaganda, but a finely targeted hit piece designed to try to fight back against the building momentum behind a Sikh sovereign nation. All this and more on today's packed show. And of course, at the end of the show, we'll take a look at loads of your great comments, which are filled up beneath the video. So thank you, as always, for those. Right, let's get underway. And yes, today actually marks a bit of a pivotal moment in the Sikh community in Canada. Today was the deadline given actually by the Sikh community in Canada and its struggle for justice on Canadian soil. I mean, for nearly 3 years since that terrible killing of Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar, we've been told by Ottawa and the politicians that, quote, investigations are ongoing and, quote, transparency is a priority. Yes, we've heard all those words before. But talk is cheap. It always is, especially when it comes to politicians. It's easy to say one thing, it's something quite else to deliver it. So today I'm going to look at this interesting update. It was reported in Press Progress. And it was a bit of a sort of a retrospective look. Okay, where are we now? What's happened? And I do have I'll show you the actual responses from the political parties in response to the pressure and basically the demands sent by the Sikh community. And it was a coalition of over 100 Sikh organisations and gurdwaras across Canada, basically representing the vast majority of Sikhs in Canada, demanded that federal party leaders stop these vague platitudes and put their commitments in writing. In other words, let's make it a little bit more official, something that you cannot renege on without at least paying at some sort of price. And they asked for 3 simple things: transparency on Indian foreign interference, the continuation of the parliamentary study into Indian state-sponsored crime, and a full public inquiry into Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar's assassination. Well, the responses are back, as I said, and we've obtained the letters from the NDP, the Conservatives and the Liberal Party's Sikh caucus. The Federal Sikh caucus, sorry, to give it its full name. And what these documents reveal, surprise, surprise, it is basically a masterclass, once again, in political manoeuvring, political speak. Now, some are finally using the words that we've waited decades to hear. Others are just hiding behind the usual old bureaucratic jargon and law and order rhetoric to avoid offending, yes, you know who, over in Delhi. It's not just about policy, though. It's about who has the courage as a politician to stand with the Sikh community and who isn't just managing some sort of PR crisis before the next election. So let's take a look at some of these responses. Here's the first one. NDP, the NDP, their new leader, Avi Lewis. This letter was dated April the 8th. And on the surface, it is actually, I have to say, the most hard-hitting document to ever come out of a federal party leader's office regarding Sikh issues. They're not just checking boxes. It is a very powerful letter. And I'll put it up here. You can freeze the screen if you actually want to read it in detail. If hopefully you can actually sort of zoom in and read the thing. But I'll give you a sort of an overview. Basically, the NDP in this letter, they're not actually just ticking boxes. They're using the right sort of language. They're explicitly supporting an independent public inquiry into the killing of Nijjar. But the real important point here, for the first time, a major party leader has committed, this is important, to a formal ban on the RSS network in Canada. They call it out for what it is, an organisation that obviously promotes hate and extremism. and they state explicitly in this letter it has no place in this country. Also, they've reaffirmed the commitment to the formal recognition of the Sikh genocide, and that is significant because it moves the needle beyond just foreign interference and into the realm of actual historical justice. So this is important. And they even go as far as calling for a ban on BJP officials who have explicitly incited violence. So, excuse me, why now? I mean, why has the NDP actually come up with something so damning and it's so powerful, actually? Well, it does mention that their former leader, Jagmeet Singh, who of course we've talked a lot about in the past, Jagmeet was a great spokesperson, unsurprisingly, for the Sikh community. But he, of course, himself was a target of Indian state threats. So, Jagmeet himself knows firsthand what the Sikh community has suffered at the hands of India. So the question is it really a principled stand? Or is it more of almost a survival tactic to secure the Sikh electoral base that feels betrayed by the Liberal NDP pact that happened in the past? At the end of the day, regardless of the motive, the NDP has set the bar. They've named the RSS, they've named the genocide. So the question is, though, of course, when it always comes to politicians, will they actually pull the trigger on these bans if they ever hold the balance of power? Big question. So let's move across to the next party. Monsieur Poilievre's party, the Conservative Party. This is, I think, in some ways, one of the more interesting ones, not necessarily one of the better ones, but one of the more interesting, nuanced responses. This actually was submitted at the end of March 27th. The NDP letter was very targeted. It was almost like a laser, very, very pointed, targeting at specific issues. What the Conservatives' response is more of instead of a laser, it's more of a floodlight. It covers just about everything except the core issue. And Poilievre, in his letter, he uses the letter to immediately refer to his favourite talking points. Crime is up. Carjackings are rising. The weak liberals, he gets it all in. It's typical right-wing sort of politics. And he frames the intimidation of Sikh Canadians as part of a general failure to maintain law and order. So again, he's framed it in right-wing politics. He's managed to somehow use the story and use it for his own political purposes. So, and he does talk about transparency and naming foreign agents, but there's something missing here, and it's pretty obvious. There's no mention of the RSS. There's no mention of the Sikh genocide. There's no mention of banning BJP officials, like the NDP did. So Poilievre's solution to the public inquiry demand is also a bit of a game. There's a bit of a game playing going on. He says he wants the work done through a parliamentary committee, not a truly independent judicial inquiry. Well, what's the difference? Committees are so much easier to control. They're easier to close down when the political winds change. If you've got an independent judicial inquiry, that's something once it starts, you can't really stop. So, again, game playing, political game playing. And the Conservative agenda is pretty clear. They want to capitalise on the community's fear of violence. But they're not willing to challenge the Hindutva ideology that's behind it, that's fueling that very violence. They talk about foreign actors in the abstract, but they won't actually name the root cause. It's a very typical, classic move, offering the community safety without offering the truth. And it's not surprising, this is right wing. And don't forget, there are allegations that many in the Conservative Party have been, at the very least, propped up by Hindutva. There is talk about Hindutva money, helping the campaigns. Even politicians have been named in various inquiries. So, of course, they've got a lot to protect on the right wing. So, in other words, there's a lot of lip service, as it's called, in this letter. But in reality, where do their true loyalties lie? And then the Federal Sikh Caucus's response, representing the Liberal government. And if you want to know why nothing's changed in 3 years, this letter is basically your answer. It's dated February. They're actually the first one to respond. But it is, unsurprisingly and almost predictably, a masterclass in bureaucratic stalling. The Liberals claim they support the principle of maximum disclosure, but then immediately defend the use of national security to limit what the public can see. They tell us that secrecy is a recognised feature of the legal system. In other words, trust us, but we're keeping secrets from you for your own good. Since when can we ever trust a politician? Or any government for that matter? And then on the specific demand for the public inquiry into Bainijar's death, they gave a flat not yet. They said they'll only consider an inquiry after the court cases are finished. Okay, on the face of it, it seems reasonable, but we know how this works. Court cases can just be dragged on for a decade or more. By the time the gaps are identified, the political will, the political pressure's gone, it's evaporated. And Carney will be on to his next trade deal with Modi. You know, it'll be forgotten about, it'll be history. It almost doesn't matter by then. Now, they do take credit for listing the Bishnoi group, the gang, as a terrorist entity and focusing on extortion. But we've talked before, targeting the gangsters is all very well, but if you then stay silent on the actual handlers, the people who are paying them the money to commit their terrorist activity, basically the Indian High Commission and the operatives working out of there. So if they're not actually mentioning them, what's the point? It's like treating a gunshot wound with a plaster, a band-aid. The Liberals are trying to look busy so we don't notice that they're doing nothing to address the state-level architects of transnational oppression. I mean, Mark Carney, you know, regular viewers know my opinion of Mark Carney. And, well, it's all pretty obvious, isn't it? So, let's get a bit more real about this. Ultimately, we've heard all these promises before. The NDP's promising a ban on the RSS, BJP officials, Liberals boasting about listing the Bishnoi group. But has any of it actually worked? What is the outcome of this? Well, the politicians' ban in the Gurdwaras and to take photo opportunities, okay, all very well, but has it actually achieved anything? The Bishnoi listing, has it actually stopped the threats? No, it hasn't. Has it stopped the extortion? No, it hasn't. It just gives the RCMP just a new piece of paper to file away. And the threat of a BJP entry ban sounds great, you know, particularly in a campaign flyer, or, you know, it's a great soundbite, isn't it? But in the world of real politics, they're rarely followed through. They never actually really come to a genuine policy. Do they actually deliver these things? Well, these politicians know that the moment they take office, the trade and diplomacy bureaucrats will tell them, oh, we can't do that. It's impossible to enforce without damaging relations. So, you know, I mean, I often sit in this very seat and I always have a go at politicians, but it is justified. These selfish agendas of these politicians rarely deliver on what their electoral voters want and ask for and actually elect them for. They say what they need to win the vote in Surrey, Brampton, wherever, it doesn't matter. But their actions, their deliverables are always weak or absent. A ban that isn't enforced is just a suggestion. As long as Canada's leaders are more worried about the price of lentils or trade with India than the level of activity of violence against Sikh activists, the deaths of Sikh activists, those bans are utterly meaningless. And then, so how is Delhi responding to this? Well, this guy, I mean, again, you remember, regular viewers remember, we covered this interview that the Indian High Commissioner, the most senior diplomat in Canada, Dinesh Patnaik, he came out fighting in complete denial. So, you know, Ottawa can write all these letters that they want. But what's India saying? India has total, utter, arrogant denial. Patnaik's interview, he said foreign interference never happened. So think about this. The Sikh community being targeted, extorted, people being assassinated on Canadian streets. The official line from the Indian state is, we're all making it up. I mean, and Indian mainstream media is just doing what it does best, framing political activism in Canada and programs like this as just anti-India extremism. They're presenting the Liberal government's silence, Carney's silence and his handshake over trade deals as a victory. To them, the fact that Mark Carney welcomes Modi is proof that Canada has learnt its lesson. And this is the biased narrative that we talk about daily, a tightly controlled message designed to undermine the Sikh diaspora and protect a Hindutva agenda. So ultimately, where does this leave us? Well, the Sikh coalition's done the hard work of forcing these politicians into the light in America. Likewise, the coalition north of the border in Canada has done the same to some degree in Canada. But we have the evidence of their intentions. The NDP offers bold words, but hasn't got any power. The Conservatives offer safety, but then won't actually name the people who are persecuting Sikhs. And the Liberals offer us a registry, judicial oversight, but actually waiting for us to forget about it before they have to deliver anything. And the hard fact is that none of these parties will, in reality, protect the Sikh community unless the political cost of ignoring Sikhs becomes higher than the cost of offending India. So we've got to hold these parties to account. Sorry, I didn't show there you go. But we've got to hold these parties, these political parties to account. You know, these letters. Because if we don't, what is the point? So when they ask for your vote, just remember, show them Avi Lewis's promise to ban the RSS. Show them Polly Everett's silence on the genocide. Show the Liberals that the Sikh community isn't falling for this wait-and-see trap. Canada, ultimately, is at a bit of a crossroads here. It can defend its sovereignty, as the Sikh community, and indeed Canadians generally, are demanding. Or it can continue to be just a playground for Indian state-sponsored violence. So the choice actually isn't just theirs, it's yours, the Canadian voters. So let's go south of the border. This guy, this is great. Let me show you a video. I came across this just was it last night. Let me play you this video. Hang on.
Shri Madhavji, how you doing? What do you have to say about the RSS burning Christians alive? What do you have to say about the RSS gang raping Muslim women? What do you have to say about the RSS massacring Christians and Muslims in India? Lynching people for eating beef? Hey, Shri Madhavji, why are you in America? Why are you in America, Madhavji? What's your agenda? What's your agenda in this country? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you attempting to influence in terms of American politics? Who are you meeting with? Who are you meeting with? Are you reporting it? And most importantly, Shri Madhavji, what do you have to say about the RSS gang raping Muslim women? Raping Christian nuns? Nothing?
Now, I'm sure most of you will recognise the gentleman doing that sterling work. It was Peter Friedrich, of course. Great to see him. That guy is just, as I said in the intro, he really is a warrior. The efforts he goes to, I mean, that in itself just is fantastic. Well done, Peter. Again. That was in Washington, D.C. So, you know, I mean, north of the border. Oh, there you go. So good you saw me twice. Yeah, so north of the border up in Canada, you've got the politicians writing, you know, all these fancy letters, the meaningless letters. But on the ground, down in Washington, D.C., you've got people like Peter Friedrich taking the fight directly to the very people who are behind the problems. So in that video, yeah, that was Peter, walking into the National Press Club and facing up to this guy, Ram Madhav. Now, the caption on the video, it calls him a leader of the RSS. Actually, in reality, that is a bit of an understatement. He's a very, very important guy. He's not just a leader. He's actually the geopolitical brain of the Hindutva project. He is a big piece in the RSS picture. And to understand, try and get a feeling of what this confrontation means and why it matters, you've got to understand who Ram Madhav is. He is a member of the RSS's National Executive and is a former National General Secretary of the BJP. But more importantly and more practically, he is the guy who globalized the RSS. Now, most RSS leaders tend to stay hidden in the shadows back in Nagpur. But this guy, Ram Madhav, he's a polished English-speaking operative. He spent decades travelling around the diaspora here in the UK, US, Australia, with a very clear agenda, a very insidious agenda. He is basically building a respectable face for Hindutva. A philosophy, of course, that we know at its core seeks to undermine the minorities like the Sikh community, Muslims, whatever. He was himself a key architect in the removal of Article 370 in Kashmir, the loss of autonomy in Kashmir. And unfortunately, that is a move that many see as a laboratory test for what the Indian state eventually plans for Punjab. So this guy is the bridge between the street-level ideology of the RSS and the Modi government and its high-level policies. He is that sort of bridge, and a very, very dangerous bridge. And you remember, again, regular viewers remember, I covered this story. The Caravan magazine, online magazine, worked with Sciences Po, a French university, and they did a huge amount of work just to see how deep this RSS rot goes. Their RSS project, just here, and do go to their website. If you click on that go-to map thing there, it opens up a global map. You can actually see all the RSS affiliations around the world. They've done a huge amount of work. And this RSS project is massive. They've exposed that the RSS operates under dozens of different names across the diaspora, posing as cultural centres, educational trusts, charitable foundations, you name it. And Ram Madhav is basically, he's the guy behind it. He's the mastermind who ensured that these groups were embedded in Western political circles. And this research that the Caravan did with Sciences Po proves everything that we've been saying. When the NDP in Canada calls for an RSS ban, they're not just talking about this group in India. They're also talking about a sophisticated multi-billion-dollar international machine network that Madhav himself helped build. And don't forget, of course, south of the border, again, in the States, USCIRF, the United States Commission on Religious Freedom, USCIRF. This explicitly has some very important parts of this, because the reason this confrontation with Peter in Washington is so explosive is the timing, because, of course, for the first time ever this year, this report, and again, regular viewers will remember my article we analysed, we did a podcast also, looking at all the recommendations of the US Commission's report on religious freedom. India had a massive mention. But also it mentioned and it recommended specifically that the US State Department officially designate the RSS as a foreign entity of concern. Now think about the weight of that. That's really significant. The top religious freedom watchdog in the world's most powerful democracy is calling for the RSS to be treated as a threat to global stability. And the recommendation even went as far as to specifically include visa bans for its leadership. So this means, obviously, people like Ram Madhav, who've travelled the world freely to spread their weaponised hate philosophy, are now facing the prospect of being legally barred from entering the United States. So Friedrich, Peter, bless him, wasn't just shouting at a politician, he was actually confronting a man whose free pass is officially being threatened to be revoked by the very institutions he's trying to manipulate. So if we pull all this together, it does create a pretty clear picture. In Washington, we've got the US Commission recommending a visa ban to members of the RSS. On the ground, we've got people like Peter Friedrich exposing the RSS's global Vishwa Vibhag networks. And north of the border, in Canada, we've got the NDP specifically calling for a full ban on the RSS network. So the reality is, when you join all those pieces together, the walls are closing in on the RSS's international operations. For years, they've trotted around the diaspora freely. They've used the diaspora as a piggy bank and, of course, as a bit of a shield. But now, because of things like the research that the Caravan did, the pressure from Sikh organisations, and, of course, the formal recommendations of that US Commission's report. The global architect of the RSS network, Ram Madhav, he's finding the world isn't actually quite as welcoming as it used to be. And to quote Peter's words in that video, the world is watching. And absolutely not just the world, but we here on Perspectives are very much watching very closely. So let's move on. This is a horrible story, this. And it's a bit of a strange one as well. But it sits in the context of many things that we have talked about and covered on the channel. This is the horrific murder of a young Sikh. I think he was 30 years old. 30 years old. Jaswinder Singh. And we, sadly, too often have to talk about how the law has been weaponised in India and India's failing democracy. But this story really just totally strips away any veneer, any pretense of civilization, of a civilized society altogether. This is the case. This is 30-year-old Jaswinder Singh. He served as a constable in the Border Security Force. He's a Jammu, born and bred, and lives in Jammu, but he actually operates obviously along the borders, particularly in Punjab. And he was a man that the Indian state theoretically trusted to guard its own borders. But when he went home, back to Jammu for some leave to look after his elderly mother, he was arrested and basically swallowed up by the torture cells that now seem to define the Indian policing system. So on March the 3rd, he was detained by the NCB, that's the Narcotics Control Bureau, and 17 days later, he was dead. But the detail of what actually happened is horrific and tells a very big story. So the NCB's official story was the usual nonsense. They claimed he died of a heart attack. But there's a 16-page post-mortem report. And that post-mortem, unsurprisingly, tells a very, very different story. Doctors found, and unfortunately I did have pictures, which has since disappeared, and maybe it's appropriate I don't show them, but the pictures of his injuries are horrific. Doctors found 34 distinct injuries across his body. So this was not a heart attack. It might ultimately have been a heart attack as a result of the horrific injuries that he sustained. But basically, this guy was tortured to death. It was a systematic, brutal assault. The report describes a 27.5 centimetre bruise. That's basically nearly a foot-long bruise on his buttock. That's a classic sign of third-degree torture. It details internal bleeding in his stomach, bruised lung, contused kidney. But the fatal blow was to his head, a massive collection of blood between his scalp and skull, with the brain itself showing pinpoint hemorrhages. And put that in plain English, they beat a soldier in their own army to death in a torture cell. Horrendous. And why was he targeted? Why was Jaswinder Singh targeted? Well, the NCB claims he had links to Pakistani smugglers, but they have actually produced no evidence of this, only what they call technical analysis. But we've been here before, we recognise the pattern. How often have I sat in this seat and talked about extrajudicial killings by the police? The drug problem in Punjab is consistently weaponised by the state to use it as a pretext for targeting Sikh men. So once again, here we are again. They've labelled Jaswinder a drug runner, despite no evidence. And the NCB have preemptively justified their brutality to the public. So they're saying because he was a drug runner, despite no evidence, we've tortured him to death. Because that's what happens. You know? And his family apparently told a very different story. They say he was being harassed over a 2024 case involving his brother. This was a case where his brother had actually apparently already been discharged by a court. So, in other words, it's really, if you read between the lines, it's very hard, obviously, to get the real genuine truth out of this, because firstly it's happening in Amritsar and Jammu, where it's very difficult to get the truth out unless people literally are on the ground putting it through social media. You certainly won't find the genuine truth in the mainstream media. And Google always hides the truth. You try and do searches on things like this. Google tends to follow the Godi Hindutva filter. In other words, you'll only be fed Godi media stories. Basically, you just do not get the truth. So it is very hard to get the truth out of what genuinely happened here, what the truth was. If you know anything, do let me know. Yeah, send me a message. But ultimately, what it does look like in reality, when you join all these dots, and again, we've been here too many times, we know in reality the high probability of what happened here. Basically, this wasn't law enforcement. It was probably collective punishment against the Sikh family for standing up against the state, for calling the state out. And it does bring us on to a point that I sadly had to talk about again too regularly. India's total lack of accountability. Now, India signed the United Nations Convention Against Torture back in 1997. This is a map of all the countries, I think in dark blue. These are the countries that have signed and ratified the UN treaty, this Convention Against Torture, in 1997. But, you'll see there, India's in light blue. Why? Because for 29 years, the Indian Parliament has refused to ratify that torture treaty. Why? Because ratifying it would mean passing a domestic law that makes a torture a specific punishable crime. Now, why would India not want to do this? Why would India not want to ratify an anti-torture treaty as a so-called democracy? We know why. It's because, as many of my podcast guests have said, people who used to live in Punjab and have told me firsthand the truth, that every police station in India has a torture cell, because torture is just a normal part of Indian so-called justice. And it means, now that India haven't ratified that law, deaths like Jaswinder's can now be easily treated as accidents or just simple assault. So even now, the Makbulpura police station in Amritsar, the one relevant to the story, is reportedly refusing to register an FIR, that's the first information report, despite the autopsy report, the autopsy report proving murder. So the autopsies come back, 34 serious injuries to this guy's body, basically killed by, it looks like, some sort of blow to the head. And the official report is, oh, he died of a heart attack. So the autopsy report is saying it was murder, but there hasn't even been an FIR issued. In other words, the police are protecting their own. It stinks. This is the police in a so-called democratic nation of India. And again, when I keep saying India is not a democracy, how often do I have to provide proof like this, that India does not follow a democratic rule of law? One of its basic tenets of being a democracy is you have a civilized rule of law, not torture cells. And the most disturbing part of the story is actually the silence of the BSF, the Border Security Force. Jaswinder was actually one of theirs. He was one of their own. But because he was on leave back in Jammu, the institutional state machine just abandoned him. It shows that in the eyes of the Hindutva-driven state, a Sikh, even one wearing one of their uniforms, is always a suspect first and a citizen second. He's a target. The truth is that India's police stations have become black holes for human rights. It doesn't matter if you're a farmer, an activist, God help you if you are, or even a border guard wearing one of their own uniforms. If you're a Sikh and you enter one of those cells, good luck, because the chances are you'll never come out alive. And it's not just police brutality. It is the calculated use of terror by these state instruments, the police, the soldiers, whoever. It's designed, it is calculated to keep the Sikh community living in fear. So Jaswinder's 34 injuries are 34 reasons why the call for a sovereign Sikh nation continues to grow. So when the state meant to protect you, or a state that is there designed to protect you, when instead it becomes your executioner, it's finished, it's over, all bets are off. The social contract is dead. It's the same in all our democratic nations. When the police stop protecting us, that social contract is over. And that's a warning, really, to India, because it's breaking down. And this is why the movement for Khalistan is growing. Now, talking about propaganda and what have you, I came across this article yesterday in, the article's dated April 26th. It's a couple of days ago, a few days ago. And this really caught my eye. Times of India. And it was actually behind a paywall, so I had to do a bit of jiggery pokery, as we call it, to try and get the actual nuts and bolts of the story. It is a deeply, deeply dangerous story that appeared. Now, the Times of India, the trouble is, and the reason why this is so dangerous is that, the Gaudiya media is full of, obvious propaganda. You go on YouTube, you go on Indian TV, NDTV, all these outlets, they're just so almost laughably propaganda. It's easy to dismiss it. What's so dangerous about the Times of India? It bears the name The Times. And it has a history. And it's like the Times here in the UK. The Times carries with it a whole baggage of respect. You expect it to be telling the truth, certainly in the UK. Okay, it's not entirely independent, the Times here in the UK, but what is written in the Times tends to be the truth. There might be a little bit of spin on it, but you can usually rely to a large degree on something written by the Times. And to some degree the same as in India, except not. Because, a lot of, let's just say that the better educated people, the people, let's say, in the higher castes in India, probably read the Times of India. Because it's a bit more academic, it's a bit more intelligent in many ways. It's not tabloid. It's a little bit more serious, better research, etc. So it is more respected, and respected by people who hold more senior positions in society, policymakers, decision makers, etc. And that is why it's so dangerous, because it holds a lot of influence with, in turn, influential people. So when I see an article like this that has a go at the Khalistan movement in a very subtle but very dangerous way, this, again, is just another thing that alerts all of us what's going on in India, and we need to highlight the truth. Again, this isn't just your laughable Gaudiya media and their sort of very colourful TV channels with lots of flashing lights and pretty ladies delivering, this, that and the other, and the Khalistan terrorists, blah, blah. This is something a little bit more subtle and a little bit more intelligent, and therefore a little bit more dangerous. So this article, it was headed, Mind the Real Sikh Aspirations in Punjab. Now, this article is a textbook example of basically divide and conquer, this strategy that was so obviously successfully used by the British Empire. And it was written by a guy called, I can't even read his name, it's too small, whatever. And his surname's Jha, J-H-A, one of their in-house journalists, I think. And what is written in this article is arguing that the world and the Indian state should stop viewing Punjab through what he calls a Khalistan prism. So, and he writes, this is a diaspora obsession, but has little to do with improving livelihoods locally. And he explicitly dismisses the pursuit of a sovereign Sikh state as a diaspora obsession. Again, it's dressing up what many critics say, it's only ever talked about in the diaspora, nobody in Punjab cares about it. He's claiming that while the word Khalistan is evocative, it's now just, he dismisses it as rhetoric from overseas activists, or a convenient political tool, but rarely an actual genuine demand from Sikhs living in India. So again, he's dressing it up in a bit more intelligent way. He's saying, look, the Khalistan movement is just something that is just a useful political tool that the diaspora uses to have a go at India. It doesn't mean anything, and there's no real genuine movement. And particularly in Punjab, it has no traction. There is no genuine support for Khalistan in Punjab. So again, it's trotting out this same old line. And it's a lie that the Indian state wants the world to believe, that the millions of Sikhs in the diaspora are somehow out of touch and obsessed with the past. But in reality, Sikhs in Punjab, they don't care. All they care about is the next meal. Well, they do, of course. That is what they care about, for a very good reason, because of Delhi's control. But it is a deliberate attempt to delegitimise the Sikh voice, to say that because you live in Canada or here in the UK or US or wherever, your political aspirations for your homeland don't count. They're irrelevant. They're meaningless. And what he conveniently ignores is why the diaspora is so vocal. He frames this resurgence of the Khalistan movement as what he calls a fresh shadow on India's social fabric. So, of course, there's a negative connotation there. But in reality, that shadow, it's not a shadow. It's actually a light, ironically, paradoxically. What's going on is it's shining a light. It's not a fresh shadow. It is a fresh light shining on India's failing democracy. And, of course, its persecution of its minorities. So the diaspora isn't obsessed. It's the diaspora are the only people able to, under democratic countries like we live in here, the diaspora is the only people who can actually have the freedom to speak out and hold the Indian government to account. So when people like Jaswinder Singh are tortured to death in Amritsar, the local population is kept in a state of state-sponsored terror. And Jar, in this article, calls economic stability the real aspiration. Well, yeah, but how can you have economic stability without political sovereignty? How can you have livelihoods when the state is weaponising the law against you? People are only worried about keeping the food on the plate because they daren't talk about anything else. And they're held in such poverty because the Indian state is raping the Punjab. And he's using, in this article, he uses the bloodshed and turmoil of the 1980s, quote, as some sort of ghost to scare the readers. He wants to frame any talk of Khalistan, any talk of self-determination, as, by implication, a return to violence. So this is how this sort of media operates. They find a way to manipulate the public into believing that the Sikh community's search for justice is actually a threat to the very social fabric. Well, ironically, it is to some degree, because that social fabric is a fake social fabric. It is a straitjacket. It is something that benefits the Hindu majority but targets, with literal violence and death, its minorities. But this is, again, why articles like this are so dangerous. So to wrap up, let's just look at, again, the picture that we've painted today in all these sort of stories. Canada is being forced to confront its silence on the RSS. Washington is seeing the mask slip from people like Madhav, whatever his name was, Ram Madhav, RSS leaders. Amritsar, we're seeing the brutality of torture cells. And the Indian media is desperately trying to tell you that none of all that matters. It's all just an obsession. So all those stories I talked about today, the truth, the real evidence that most Indians will never know about or hear about, that apparently is just an obsession according to the Indian media. They've had no choice to try and keep their population under control. They have to hide the truth. So they've had to dress all stories like this up that I've reported on today as some sort of obsession. Meaningless. It's just an obsession with the diaspora. The truth is, they are terrified of a global, articulate, successful, united Sikh diaspora. They want you to stay away, stay in your own lane. But sadly, bad news, guys. We are here. We're going to keep talking about it. We are going to keep talking about the truth. We're not going to let you get away with it. Finally, just a reminder. that Sikh groups across Europe today will gather, all being well, outside the European Parliament building in Brussels, that's in Belgium, to mark the 40th anniversary since that Sabak Khalsa, the official declaration of Khalistan. That declaration of Khalistan obliges all Sikhs to pursue the concept of Khalistan. So, all the transnational oppression, everything bad that's going on, don't worry. Keep the faith, as I keep saying, because stuff like this is going on. It's a rally, it's a press conference. Leading figures in the Khalistan movement will speak. It's a powerful sign of what's going on. So, if you're in Europe, get there quickly. Get there quickly. What time does it start? 12 o'clock. There you go. The rally's at 12 o'clock. So that's pretty soon. Depending on what time you're watching this, of course. Anyway, if you're in Brussels, certainly, get on your bike, get on a tram, get on a bus, get there. Go join the crowd. So good luck to them. If I get any pictures, I'll show you afterwards how it looked. So on that note, let's move on to our comments. Right, thank you, everybody. Thank you to wonderful audience who clearly really enjoyed this story as much as I did. Khalistan Football Association. I love doing this thumbnail. Yes, I obviously had to dip into AI to produce this, but it was just a joyful thumbnail to produce because, yes, this is the aspiration. One day we will hopefully see a Sikh holding up the World Football Cup. And, of course, you guys out there, equally as joyful about the prospect. Punjab, yes, well done, boys, brilliant. Hardal Singh, likewise, congratulations, keep it up. Narinderjit Singh Saini, congratulations. Uncanny Wizard, let's go. You were all there. Avatar Dylan, nice one. If Khalistan, it would definitely remind you of Teen Wolf. For those, this is an old film. This is going back to the 80s. It's showing our ages on this one. I remember the film Teen Wolf, as you jokingly referred to it. That was actually where a very hairy, what was his name? His name escapes it. Michael J. Fox, I think, off memory, if I'm correct. I think he turns into a werewolf, basically becomes a hairy werewolf. But I think symbolically, essentially, this is, I think it's sort of the implication. It says Sikh, how powerful and successful Sikhs are with that unshorn hair. It reminds me of the Samson and Delilah story. But anyway, that's another reference. But yes, thank you, Avatar, for your comment. And then TC, likewise, great news. Well done, boys. And then you said another bit of good news. Derby Mayor Ajit Singh Atwal. Yes, I haven't had time. I've only just picked up your comment. I will look into that. So that does sound, if I'm correct, if I've interpreted your comment correctly, there is a newly elected mayor who happens to be a Sikh in Derby. I will check that out and hopefully report on it. So thanks for letting me know, TC. I'll check that out. World 22 IDE. Yes, now, of course, this follows the sporting theme. You talk about it does in India, and I'll just paraphrase. I think a lot of the comment here, basically to say, there are a lot of successful Sikh sportsmen and women, primarily because of everything we talk about, how well-being, fitness, health is such an integral part of being a Sikh. That is, of course, the sort of the 21st century legacy of the Khalsa, the establishment of the Khalsa, where the 10th Guru said, we must, as a people, remain fit and healthy. It all go back to Hargobind Ji, I think, as well. Was he the 6th Guru? And basically, there is this obligation to stay fit and healthy so that you can become effective soldiers, so you can stand up to oppression as an effective, capable soldier, which of course has now evolved into the modern day context in sport. So this is why Sikhs are so good at hockey, boxing, you name it, hopefully now football, etc. But of course India takes advantage of this, and it subsumes these Sikh sportsmen and women into the national Indian squads and say, oh look, what great Indians they are. Well, yeah, maybe, but in reality, they're great Sikhs. And once Khalistan is established, absolutely, we'll repossess these people, our leading sportsmen and women. We will stick Khalistan shirts to them, not Indian shirts, Khalistan shirts. There's a big difference. So we will repossess our own, essentially, is the argument. So, yeah, I hope I paraphrased your comment correctly in that. And then Paramjit Mangat. Oh, yes, thank you for this. Yeah, I did ask you Because when we talked about Khalistan, one of the questions that popped up was, and I've never thought about this, what would be the Sikh national anthem? Because, of course, once hopefully, not hopefully, let's be more positive, once Khalistan gets to the World Cup, then, of course, they will have to sing their national anthem and it will be broadcast globally. So what should the national anthem be? Well, thank you, Paramjit, for letting me know. You have one already. It's from the Guru Gobind Singh's Banis, which I think is the scriptures. I didn't know that. I haven't actually seen them, and of course they will be in Gurmukhi, is it? So thank you. That probably means more to my audience than to myself in terms of what it really says and what the words are. Maybe I'll try and do some digging. Or better still, if you guys know what the words are, can you email them? Let me know. Send them to me in an email. And if it's in Gurmukhi or Punjabi, I'll use good old Google Translate. But it's better if you guys can translate it. If any of you are bilingual, then I'll know for sure and get it right, obviously, which is quite important. So I would love to know that. That would be great to see. So anyway, thank you, Paramjit, for pointing that out. Punjab, right, okay. This is interesting. As always, I would say always Punjab, your comments are always very lengthy, but very interesting. And they're lengthy because they have to be, because you go into so much important detail and stuff that you talked about. And this was actually part of, I've extracted this from a little bit of a conversation that went on between you two guys, Uncanny Wizard and Punjab. And this was an interesting point, actually, and it's about the Nihangs. And strangely enough, I did come across an article a few days ago where the credibility of the Nihangs was called into question. And Punjab, you in your comment actually bring out this very same point, so clearly there is something in it, is that the question is, how effective are Nihangs? Are they really who we think they are? I've always held Nihangs from my third-party external observational perspective. I've always assumed Nihangs were these heroic, great figures protecting the Panth. You know, they're there. Any biadbi, any sacrilege, they're straight on it. Any threat to the Panth, it's the Nihangs who are the frontline warriors. They are the guys there on the front line, the sharp end. But it turns out that might not strictly be the case. Punjab points out, and it, as I say, it does ally with an article I saw recently. I didn't mean to actually do a news article on this. I haven't had time, and it dropped down the priorities. Maybe I should have done it. I'll see if I can find it again. But you say they are what the Guruji called Malish Khalsa, the fake Khalsa. Yeah. Are they real? Are they fake Sikhs? That is a deep concern. So thank you, Punjab, for pointing that out. Yeah, we'll have to do maybe some digging on that story. But anyway, I also wanted to point out that it was part of a longer conversation. Uncanny Wizard did actually make a comment that actually Punjab did respond to. Because I think Uncanny Wizard said that basically your comments, you could write a book in all the comments because your comments are so lengthy. And Punjab, obviously on the defensive, understandably, came, look, no, you know, hold back, you know, don't be rude, basically. And I think this is a classic example of social media and misinterpretations, because social media doesn't have body language. You can't see somebody's face when they say something. You just literally have to read the words, and they are so often misinterpreted. The tone is misinterpreted, and I think that is what's happened here. Uncanny Wizard came back and said, no, it's not a personal vendetta. Thank you for your messages. Keep them up. Let's work together. In other words, and again, Punjab, don't worry. Again, I think this always comes down to the misinterpretation of tone. Uncanny Wizard clearly was actually supporting you. Just the words that Uncanny Wizard used might not have been, or been misinterpreted as being more negative than they were actually meant. So I think this is a lesson to all of us on social media. Just always assume the best. Don't assume the worst. Don't wade in and start attacking somebody because they might not have been actually saying something in a negative way or in a critical way. And the key message from Uncanny Wizard is, look, let's work together because we're all aligned. All of us on the channel are aligned. We're all working for the same goal. We are shoulder to shoulder. Yes, of course, we'll disagree on bits and pieces. We're human beings. It's natural. But ultimately, we're pursuing the same goal. So let's all work together. Keep it polite. Keep it respectful, as frankly you always do. It's anyway we get idiots from Hindutva who sadly irregularly drop in. It's a shame they don't drop in more often. It would create a bit more of a fun confrontation, let's say. Anyway, final set. Samsung kicks us off, and this is important. Always fair and balanced. Thanks, Angus. Well, yeah, it's interesting. Fair and balanced. I don't think I am fair and balanced. I think I'm slightly unbalanced because there is a clear agenda. I've got to admit and be upfront, is we have a pro-Khalistan agenda. But in reality, ultimately what I do is at least provide the truth, or at least what I believe is the truth. I always try to corroborate things. I'm not the Godi media, which just basically lies and spins and comes up with complete and utter propaganda. So what I try to do here is I try to be fair, and I do try to be balanced where I can be. But ultimately, I do have an agenda. We're here for one very good, simple reason. We all support Khalistan. So I obviously spin all the stories, and I produce stories that are actually support the concept of Khalistan, but also highlight those that are attacking the concept and the truth. So anyway, but thank you. That's a nice comment. Much appreciated. Uncanny Wizard does pop back in again and saying, I do make your day with the news and keeping the morale high. Well, that's important. As I say, it is important that those of you out there who sometimes feel, am I the only one who feels like this? Am I the only one who seems to support Khalistan? No, you're not. We are all together. You are not alone. The voices number in the millions. Here's a fact for you. I heard through a very, very reliable source that the number of votes pro-Khalistan in the referendum thus far is around 1.6 million people. Think about that. That's just in the diaspora of those who bothered to turn up to vote. Now you think of those who couldn't get to the referendum. You think of those in the Punjab who have been denied the option to vote for Khalistan. In other words, you're not alone. We are all in it together. This is why the morale is high, because you're not alone. I'm here just to remind all of you, you're not alone. The Khalistan movement is massive. A lot of it is secret. It has to be. Literally, because people's lives are at stake, particularly in the Punjab. But the feeling is there. You look at the election of Amritpal Singh and Beyant Singh, or Beyant Singh's son. They prove the Khalistan movement is not just alive and well, it is thriving. You look at Waris Punjab Day, the push for Amritpal Singh to become Chief Minister of Punjab. It's winning. This is why India is so terrified, and why all of you guys can actually hold your heads high and keep the morale high, because the battle is being won. The war is being won. The Khalistan movement is on the front foot. India's on the back foot. The Khalistan movement is winning battle after battle after battle. We might not lose it. We might not win every battle, but ultimately we're winning the war, because we have the most powerful weapons, the truth. The truth always wins. And the people and the truth always prevail. Democracy always prevails in the end. Doesn't matter what authoritarian regime you live in. Soviet Union, China, North Korea, wherever. Czechoslovakia, all these East European regimes, authoritarian regimes, they all fell in the end. Soviet Union, they all fell in the end because the people and democracy won. So anyway, I've gone on a bit about that one. But yes, absolutely, Uncanny Wizard. Morale is high, as it should be. So keep a smile on your face. Keep flying your Khalistan flag, because we're winning. And Mr. 403, yes, I should be nominated as a British diplomat for Khalistan. It would be an absolute pleasure to be. And in fact, there was another comment. I've not put it on this one. Maybe it's on another video. And somebody actually suggested I should make my home in Khalistan. You know what? Absolutely, why not? Because the weather will certainly be a lot warmer, and the beautiful Punjabi, Khalistani countryside, absolutely. Who wouldn't want to live there? So, yeah, indeed. I look forward to having a plum job in Khalistan, warming my whatsits in the Punjabi, Khalistani sunshine. It's definitely a tempting offer. And signing off, James Singh. God bless you and your family. Well, again, turn that back on you guys. God bless you and all your families. And God bless the Khalistan movement. because clearly he or she really is. And it's your name, actually, that struck me, James Singh. We haven't heard from James, our own James, for a long time. He hasn't popped into the comments for some time. And that just made me laugh. Maybe, for all we know, James is converted. And maybe he is James Singh now, for all we know. And if it is, let me know. Anyway, final sign-off goes to Jaskirat Singh. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa. Oh no, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Waheguru Ji Chardi Kala. Khalistan Zindabad. Absolutely. That is what it's all about. Khalistan Zindabad. That is why we're here. So anyway, that's it for another day and indeed another week. Good heavens, these weeks do pass quickly. Do let me know your thoughts. Do drop comments below. Much appreciated. Let me know stories that I should be talking about, because you guys quite often get to hear these things first. Many of you have been emailing me. Thank you for your links or hints to stories that you've picked up as well. It's always very, very useful because, of course, the mainstream don't pick these things up. It's up to you guys on the ground out there, on your social media accounts, WhatsApp accounts, whatever. If you pick something up that's interesting, that needs looking into, let me know. But that's it. You can email me, of course, message@satlechtv.com. Watch out for my podcast tomorrow, Dr. Greywell. We're doing another interesting one about Khalistan. We're going to talk about what is required to establish a nation and why all those boxes are ticked with the Khalistan concept. So do watch that. That'll be uploaded tomorrow. But that is it for Perspectives for another week. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great rest of the week. And all being well, Perspectives will be back on Monday. The podcast back tomorrow. Have a great day.